what was there at the very beginning? It's a question that has haunted philosophers, mystics, and scientists for millennia. Before the stars ignited, before time even began to tick, before there was matter or energy or light, what was there? If you ask the ancient Greeks, their answer is both incredibly simple and profoundly complex. They called it chaos. Now, when we hear the word chaos today, we think of a messy room, a traffic jam, or just general disorder. But for the Greeks, chaos or chaos in the original tongue was something else entirely. It wasn't a state of messiness. It was the absence of everything. The word itself is thought to come from a verb meaning to yawn or to gape open. So, I want you to picture that. Not a swirling vortex of disorganized stuff, but an infinite, silent, gaping void. A cosmic yawn. It was the great, primordial emptiness. Imagine trying to exist in such a place. There's no up or down, no left or right. There's no light to see, no air to breathe, no ground to stand on. There's no sound, not even the whisper of your own thoughts, because the very concepts of sound and thought haven't been born yet. It is the ultimate sensory deprivation tank, stretched out to infinity. This isn't just nothing in the sense of an empty box. The box itself doesn't exist yet. Chaos is the raw, unformed, and boundless potential for a universe. It is the state before being. The Greek poet Hesiod, who gave us one of the most complete accounts in his Theogony, put it simply, first of all, chaos came to be. He doesn't say it was created, it just was the fundamental, baseline state of reality. But was this void truly empty? That's where things get interesting. Some interpretations see chaos not as a complete vacuum, but as a sort of cosmic soup of all the basic elements of the universe, all jumbled together in a dark, formless mass. In this view, chaos holds the potential for everything: earth, water, air, fire, but they are all indistinct, undifferentiated, and it's like having all the ingredients for a cake thrown into a bowl, but they haven't been mixed, they haven't been baked. And the very concepts of cake or baking don't exist yet. It's pure, unharnessed potential. A universe in waiting, asleep in the dark. This is a starkly different starting point from many other creation myths. There is no all-powerful, all-knowing, creator, deity, who speaks the universe into existence from a place of conscious will. There's no divine architect with a grand design. The Greek cosmos doesn't begin with an act of creation, but with a process of emergence. Things don't get made so much as they separate and define themselves out of the primordial state. It's a far more impersonal, almost scientific beginning. It suggests that the universe wasn't a planned project, but an inevitable unfolding of latent possibility. For an eternity, or perhaps for no time at all since time didn't exist, this was the state of everything, a silent, featureless, endless abyss. But a void, by its very nature, is unstable. Potentiality, by its very definition, begs to become actuality. The silence couldn't last forever. Deep within the boundless, gaping darkness of chaos, something began to stir. Not a conscious decision, not an action, but a fundamental shift. The first great segregation was about to occur. The universe was about to take its first breath. From the heart of this nothingness, the first somethings were about to arise. These would unbeaked gods in the way we think of them, not bearded figures on thrones or anthropomorphic beings with human-like passions. These first entities would be far more fundamental. They would be the very building blocks of reality itself. They were the concepts that had to exist before any story could begin. The stage had to be set before the actors could arrive. And as the infinite yawn of chaos began to contract, to focus, to give way to a new reality, the first of these primordial beings prepared to emerge into existence, forever changing the nature of everything and nothing. The great sleep was ending. The universe was about to wake up. So, how do you get a universe from a cosmic yawn? How does absolute nothingness give way to, well, everything? In the Greek version of events, it's not an act of a divine hand. It's more like a chemical reaction, a settling of cosmic dust. From the boundless, formless potential of chaos, the first distinct realities began to precipitate, like crystals forming in a supersaturated solution. And the very first thing to take shape, the first true entity to emerge from the void, wasn't a god, but a place, a foundation. Her name was Gaia Earth. After an eternity of featureless emptiness, here was something solid, something you could stand on if there was anyone to stand. Gaia was the bedrock of the new reality. She wasn't a goddess of the earth, she was the earth. Her body formed the hills, the plains, and the hidden valleys. She was the first here in a universe that, until now, had no sense of location. She provided a stage, a stable ground upon which all future events could unfold. Imagine the sheer significance of that. Out of infinity, out of shapelessness, a shape, Gaia represented order, stability, and a physical reality. But as Gaia solidified, another entity emerged in parallel, a dark counterpoint to her life-giving surface. This was Tartarus. If Gaia was the stage, Tartarus was the abyss beneath the stage, a deep, primordial pit located as far beneath the earth as the sky would eventually be above it. Hesiod describes it with a terrifying sense of scale. If you were to drop a bronze anvil from the heavens, it would fall for 9 days and 9 nights to reach the earth, and if you dropped it from earth, it would fall for another 9 days and nights before it hit the bottom of Tartarus. This wasn't the underworld as we often think of it, the realm of Hades where the souls of the dead go. That comes much, much later. Tartarus was older, deeper, and far more dreadful. It was a place of utter darkness, a cosmic prison for the most monstrous and powerful entities. It was the universe's ultimate dungeon, a place of confinement and punishment, born at the same time as the earth itself. So now we have a ground and an abyss, a solid plain and a deep pit, but they're just there, inert, static, for anything to happen, for life to begin, for gods to be born. You need one more ingredient, a driving force, and so, from chaos, emerged the third primordial being, arguably the most important of them all. Now, I need you to immediately erase the image in your head of a chubby baby with a bow and arrow. That's Cupid, the Roman version, a much later and more trivial figure. This is primordial Eros. This is love, yes, but not in the romantic, Valentine's Day sense. This is love as a fundamental, cosmic force. It is desire, it is attraction, procreation, the irresistible impulse that draws things together to create something new. Eros is the engine of the universe. Without Eros, Gaia and Tartarus would just be two separate, lonely concepts, existing in parallel forever. Eros is the force that would allow them, and all the beings to come, to interact, to mingle, to create. He is the cosmic glue, the universal magnetism that ensures the story doesn't just stop at Earth and a pit exists. He is the reason for every birth, every union, and every generation of gods to come. Some ancient poets even said Eros was the very first, that even chaos was subject to his power of bringing things together. While these three fundamental pillars of reality, a place to stand, a place to be confined, and a reason to create, were forming, chaos had a final gasp. From the endless void, to more beings emerged, children of the original darkness itself. There were Erebus and Nyx. Erebus was the embodiment of deep, primordial gloom, the profound darkness that existed within the confines of the world, often associated with the shadowy depths of Tartarus itself. If chaos was the external void, Erebus was the captured, internal darkness. And his sister, Nyx, was night. She was the active, sweeping veil of darkness that would drape itself over Gaia every evening. She was more personified, a powerful and mysterious figure, who even Zeus himself would later learn to fear. So let's take a head count of our first generation of beings, the board of directors for the new corporation of reality. We have Gaia, the earth, Tartarus, the pit, Eros, the creative desire, Nyx, the night, and Erebus, the darkness. These aren't gods in the Olympian sense. You don't pray to Gaia for a good harvest. She is the harvest. You don't ask Eros to help you find a partner. He is the force of attraction itself. They are the operating system of the universe. And now, the stage is set. The fundamental laws are in place. But the stage is empty. Gaia, the broad-breasted earth, the foundation of all, exists. And thanks to Eros, the urge to create exists with her. But she is alone. What does a lonely earth do in a brand new universe? She starts to build. So, here we are. The universe has its foundations. Gaia, the solid ground. Tartarus, the deep abyss. Eros, the driving force of creation, and the siblings of darkness, Erebus and Nyx. But for all intents and purposes, Gaia is the center of this new reality. She is the ground of all being, quite literally, yet she is alone. Imagine being the only solid thing in a vast, dark emptiness. A great, sprawling landmass surrounded by nothing but potential and shadows. It's a lonely existence. But remember, Eros is also here. The force of desire, of procreation, is a fundamental part of this new reality. And Gaia, full of this nascent creative energy, doesn't need a partner. Not yet. She is so fundamentally powerful, so brimming with potential, that she can begin to create all on her own, through a process the Greeks called parthenogenesis. Think of it like this. Gaia looks at her own vast, flat expanse and feels the need for something more. She needs a counterpart, something to complement her. So, she brings forth a being equal to herself, someone who could cover her completely. And this son is Uranus, the sky. Uranus, or Uranus in the Greek, was not a god of the sky. He was the sky, a great, starry dome that arched over Gaia, meeting her at the horizon on all sides. He was born of earth to cover the earth. He was her perfect, equal match. With his creation, the world suddenly had dimension. It had a top and a bottom. It had a shape. Uranus brought the stars with him, sprinkling the darkness of Nyx with points of light. He was the celestial vault, the home of future gods, the source of rain that would one day water Gaia's surface. This was the first great pairing, the fundamental duality of earth and sky that is a cornerstone of so many mythologies around the world. But here, in the Greek telling, the sky is born directly from the earth, her son. This act of creation makes their future relationship more complicated, to say the least. We'll get to that. But for now, just appreciate the sheer power of Gaia. Without any external help, she has created her own partner, a vast and beautiful sky to stretch above her. But she wasn't done. A great landmass needs texture. It needs features. A flat plain stretching to the horizon is one thing, but Gaia's creative impulse demanded more. So, still on her own, she gave birth to the Area, the mountains. These weren't individual mountain gods, with names like Olympus or Helicon yet. Those would come later. This was the idea of mountains, the primal essence of jagged peaks and rocky slopes. They shot up from her surface, giving her dimension, majesty, and a rugged beauty. They were her graceful haunts of the goddess nymphs. As Hesiod puts it, they were the bones of the earth, giving her structure and strength. And still, she continued, what is a world without water? So next, Gaia gave birth to Pontus, the sea. Again, this isn't the later god, Poseidon, who rules the waves with a trident. This is the primordial sea itself, the raw, untamed, barren salt water. He was the personification of the ocean's vastness and depth. With the birth of Pontus, the geography of the world was largely complete, at least in its broadest strokes. We have the land, the sky, the mountains, and the sea, all born from the earth, mother, alone. It's a powerful statement about the centrality of Gaia to this entire cosmology. Everything we consider the natural world springs from her directly. She is the ultimate matriarch, the source of all physical reality. She doesn't need a male counterpart to begin shaping the world. She is self-sufficient, a being of immense creative power. So, the stage is now beautifully set. We have a world of breathtaking scale and grandeur, a solid earth, covered in majestic mountains, surrounded by the deep sea, and all of it lovingly blanketed by a starry sky. It's a silent, pristine world, but it's also a world without life, without drama, without a story. It's a masterpiece of landscape painting, but no figures are moving within it. This is where the dynamic changes. Gaia, having created her own partner in Uranus, now lies beneath him. The sky literally covers the earth. And that force we talked about, Eros, the engine of creation, is still at work. Now that a pairing exists, Earth and Skyros can begin to work its magic between them. The solitary phase of creation is over. The age of unions, of divine families, is about to begin. The relationship between Gaia and her son, Uranus, is about to become a partnership. A deeply strange, incredibly fertile, and ultimately tragic partnership. From this union, the first generation of true gods will be born. The world is about to get a lot more crowded and a lot more dangerous. The first act of creation is complete. The second act, filled with love, jealousy, and incredible violence, is about to start. While Gaia was busy giving form to the physical world, the land, the sky, the mountains, the sire, different kind of creation was happening in the shadows. Remember Nyx and Erebus? The primordial siblings of night and darkness who also sprang from the original chaos. They weren't just sitting idle. If Gaia was populating the world with tangible things, Nyx and Erebus were populating the cosmos with something far more abstract, far more unsettling. They were giving birth to the very concepts that govern the darker side of existence. Nyx, the powerful and enigmatic goddess of night, was a mother of immense and terrifying fertility. Like Gaia, she could produce offspring all on her own, without a partner, and her solo children are a chilling list of the forces that haunt our mortal land. Alone, she gave birth to Moros, the embodiment of doom and impending misfortune, not death itself, but the sense of a terrible fate hanging over you. She bore Ker, the personification of violent death, the kind you'd find on a battlefield. She brought forth Thanatos, who was death in a more personified, final, sinister, peaceful end. That comes for everyone. And alongside him, she bore his twin brother Hypnos, who was sleep. It makes perfect sense. Sleep is the brother of death, the little death that we experience every night under the cloak of his mother Nyx. But she didn't stop there. The children of night read like a catalogue of human anxieties. She birthed the Onaroi, the tribe of dreams, who could be deceptive or prophetic, flitting into the minds of sleepers from the dark. She bore Momus, the spirit of blame and relentless criticism, the nagging voice that finds fault in everything. She created Oases, the very essence of misery, pain, and suffering. And then she birthed the the nymphs who guarded the golden apples at the far western edge of the world, a place of twilight and mystery. Most terrifying of all, alone, Nyx gave birth to the Moirae, the Fates. Clotho, the spinner, who spins the thread of life. Lachesis, the allotter, who measures the thread. And Atropos, the unturnable, who cuts the thread. These three held power over every mortal and every god. Even Zeus himself could not defy their decree. The fact that the Fates, the ultimate arbiters of destiny, are born from nights, alone, tells you something profound about the Greek worldview. Your destiny is a dark, mysterious thing, spun in the shadows, outside the control of even the highest celestial powers. Then, Nyx joined with her brother, Erebus, the deep gloom. Their union was, predictably, not a cheerful one. Together, they produced Ether and Hem. This is fascinating because it's a moment of light coming from absolute darkness. Ether was the personification of the bright, glowing upper air of the heavens, the pure air that the gods breathe, and Hemoroa's day, the bright counterpart to her mother, Nita. So, in this telling, day doesn't just appear, she is born from the union of night and darkness. Every single morning, Hemera would emerge, pulling back the dark cloak of her mother Nyx, and every evening Nyx would return, drawing her veil across the sky once more. Their relationship was a perpetual, daily cycle of emergence and retreat. But the dark procreation continued. Nyx and Erebus together also produced a host of other grim figures. They gave us Nemesis, the goddess of retribution and righteous anger, the force that brings down the proud and punishes arrogance. They created Apate, the spirit of deceit and trickery. They bore Phalotes, which is a bit of an odd one. Audit means friendship and affection, but in this context, it was often seen as a shallow, deceptive kind of fondness. They gave us Jaras, the dreaded spirit of old age, the slow decay of the body. And finally, they gave birth to Eris, the goddess of strife and discord. Eris, a particularly nasty piece of work, would later become famous for starting the Trojan War by tossing a golden apple, inscribed, "To the fairest among the goddesses," and Eris, true to her nature, went on to have her own children, all by herself, a horrible brood including toil, forgetfulness, famine, and murder. So what does all this mean? It means that at the same time the physical world was being ordered, the moral or conceptual world was also being populated, and, crucially, all the difficult, painful, and frightening aspects of death, strife, deceit, misery are just as primordial as the earth and sky. They aren't punishments or later corruptions. They are fundamental parts of the cosmic fabric, born from the original darkness. The Greeks didn't shy away from this. They didn't pretend the universe was all sunshine and rainbows. Pain, suffering, and death were woven into the very beginning of everything. And they all answered to a powerful, primeval mother Nyx, the night, a figure so ancient and so respected that all other gods knew better than to cross her. With the world physically formed and its conceptual underpinnings laid, the next great chapter of creation begins. This is the story of the first divine family, the union of earth and sky. Gaia, the broad-breasted earth, now lies with her son, Uranus, the starry sky, who covers her from end to end. This is a powerful, elemental union. Every drop of rain from the sky that falls upon the earth is a symbol of their continuous embrace. And with the force of Eros compelling them, This union was destined to be incredibly fertile. From it would come the first generation of beings we can truly call gods. Powerful entities with distinct personalities and domains. These were the 12 Titans. The Titans were, in a word, huge. The name itself is thought to relate to a word meaning to strain or to stretch, and that's exactly what they were. They were beings of immense scale and power, personifying the great, often untamable forces of nature. They were bigger, more primal, and in some ways more chaotic than the Olympian gods who would eventually replace them. They were the first rulers of the cosmos. Let's meet the first 6, the male Titans. The most important, though he was the youngest, was Cronus. We'll talk a lot more about him later. But for now, know him as the ambitious, cunning, and ultimately paranoid leader of his generation. His name is often associated with time, though that's likely a later confusion with the Greek word. He was a god of the harvest, wielding a sickle, but his defining characteristic was his ruthless ambition. Then there was unlike Pontus, who was the sterile, geographical Ionis, was the great, world-encircling river. The Greeks believed a massive freshwater river flowed in a circle around the edges of the flat earth, and this was Ocean. He was the source of all the world's rivers, springs, and rain clouds. He was a god of the gentle, life-giving waters, a stark contrast to with his sister wife Tethys. He would father 3,000 river gods and 3,000 ocean nymphs. He was a god of immense, generative power. Next were the brothers Hyperion and Hyperion, whose name means the one who is above, was the Titan of light, specifically the celestial light of the sun, moon, and dawn. He was the first sun god, in a sense, before Apollo took over the job. Iapetus is a more obscure figure, but his name is sometimes translated as the piercer. He was the father of several important second-generation Titans, including Prometheus, who would famously create mankind, and Atlas, who would be condemned to hold up the sky. So Iapetus's legacy is defined by the actions of his revolutionary sons. The final 2 male Titans were Zeus and Cronus. Zeus was the Titan of intellect and questioning, his name related to the word for query. He represented the axis of the heavens around which the constellations revolved, a pillar of the north. Cronus was an even more obscure figure, perhaps associated with the constellations, particularly Aries, and he was seen as a pillar of the south. Together Zeus and their brothers Iapetus and Hyperion were sometimes seen as the 4 cosmic pillars holding the sky apart from the Job. Their nephew Atlas would later take on all by himself. These 6 brothers were matched by 6 sisters. The first was Rhea, whose destiny would be intertwined with her brother, Cronus. She was a mother goddess, much like her own mother Gaia, associated with fertility, motherhood. She was the serene, suffering matriarch of the Titan age. Next was Thea, the Titaness of sight and the brilliant light of the clear blue sky. She was the perfect partner for her brother Hyperion, the Titan of celestial light. Together, they would give birth to Helios, Selene, and Eos. They were the parents of all that shines from above. Then came Phoebe, whose name means bright or radiant. She was associated with intellect and prophecy, much like her brother husband Zeus. Most famously, she was the original possessor of the oracle at Delphi, a center of prophecy. She would eventually pass down to her grandson, Apollo. Themis was another crucial Titaness. Her domain was divine law, order, and custom. She was the personification of the natural and moral order of the universe. She understood the primal laws that even the gods had to obey. She would later become a key advisor to Zeus, bringing her ancient wisdom to the new Olympian age. Tethys was the wife of the great river god. She was the mother of all the rivers and springs, a primal font of fresh water. She represented the power of water to nurture and sustain life on earth. And finally, there was Mnemosyne, whose name literally means memory. She was the personification of memory, and later, she would lie with Zeus to give birth to the 9 muses, the goddesses of the arts and sciences. Without Nemo's wine, there would be no history, no stories, no songs. So there you have them, 12 massive, powerful beings, the first dynasty of gods. They represent the fundamental forces of the cosmos, the sun, the moon, the world river, divine law, memory, prophecy. They were a complete and balanced generation, 6 brothers and 6 sisters, who would go on to pair up and populate the world with a second generation of deities. For a moment, it seems like a golden age has dawned. The universe is ordered, ruled by a powerful and stable family. But this idyllic picture hides a dark secret. For Gaia and Uranus, Their creative partnership wasn't all about producing these glorious titans. They had other children. Monstrous children. And the way Uranus would react to them would set the stage for the first great war in heaven. So, we have the first divine family photo all set. Gaia, the Earth Mother, Uranus, the Sky Father, and their 12 glorious children, the Titans. They are a powerful, majestic, and seemingly perfect generation of gods, personifying the great forces that hold the universe together. It looks like the start of a beautiful, orderly dynasty. But if you know anything about Greek mythology, you know that orderly and perfect are never the whole story. The creative union between earth and sky wasn't finished, and the next children they had were ... different. These were the siblings, the Titans, probably. They didn't talk about at celestial dinner parties. After the 12 Titans, Gaia once again gave birth. But these 3 new sons were not godlike in the same way. They were powerful, yes, but their form was shocking, a deviation from the divine blueprint. Each of them was born with a single, massive, round eye set right in the middle of his forehead. These were the original sons. Forget the sheep-herding monster that Odysseus encounters later. These were not his people. These were the first generation, the elder Cyclopes, and they were beings of immense power and skill. Their names told the story of their nature: Brontes, which means the thunderer; Sterops, which means the flasher, as in a flash of lightning; and Argus, the bright or the vivid, thunder, lightning, and bright flashes of energy. These weren't just giants with one eye. They were the living embodiments of the storm. They were born with hearts of stone, meaning they were stubborn, strong-willed, and incredibly resilient. But more than that, they were master craftsmen. They were the first smiths, the universe's first great artisans of metal and fire. Imagine them, huge, powerful figures. They're single, eye-focused, with terrifying intensity on their work. The rhythmic earth-shaking clang of their hammers on primordial anvils, the roar of their forges stoked with cosmic fire. They were brute force combined with incredible skill. They were the personification of raw, creative, industrial power. While the Titans represented the grand, sweeping forces of the cosmos, the Cyclopes represented the violent, focused energy that could shape reality itself. They could build, and they could destroy. You can already sense a problem, can't you? Uranus, the sky, prided himself on his perfection, his beautiful, starry expanse. The Titans, in their majestic forms, were a reflection of that. But these Cyclopes, they were earthy, loud, misshapen, and wielded the chaotic power of the thunderstorm. They were more like their mother Gaia, powerful, and a little bit messy. Uranus looked at them not with love, but with a growing sense of unease. And then, Gaia gave birth one last time, and if Uranus was disturbed by the Cyclopes, this next brood sent him into a spiral of pure terror and revulsion. These were the most terrifying of all of Gaia's children, 3 more sons. Their names were Cotus, Brireos, and Gyges, and history would know them as the Hecate. The name means the 100-handed ones, and that's exactly what they were. Each one of them was born with 100 impossibly strong arms sprouting from their shoulders, and, as if that weren't enough, 50 heads. Take a moment to truly picture that. It's not just a guy with a lot of arms. It is a walking engine of chaos. A writhing, surging mass of limbs. 50 heads, all capable of thinking, screaming, and seeing. 50 different perspectives at once. What would that even sound like? A cacophony of 50 voices speaking in unison, or arguing with each other. They were living avatars of overwhelming force. Hesiod says they were monstrous, and their power was irresistible. They weren't just strong. They were strength personified to an absurd, terrifying degree. If the Titans were the universe's aristocracy, and the Cyclopes were its master engineers, the Hecatonchires were its living siege weapons. They had no subtle domains like law or memory. Their power was simple, unadulterated, absolute physical might. They could overwhelm any opponent through sheer, unstoppable force, hurling mountains as if they were pebbles. Now, put yourself in Uranus's position. He is the Sky Father, the first king of the universe. He values order, beauty, and control, and his wife, the Earth, keeps giving birth to these things. First, the one-eyed smiths who command the chaotic power of the storm, and now, these 50-headed, 100-handed monstrosities of pure, unbridled strength. He looks at them, and he doesn't see his children. He sees a threat. He sees the raw, untamable power of the earth rising up to challenge his pristine sky. He sees chaos, ugliness, and power that could one day be turned against him. His love for Gaia, his partner, was now overshadowed by his hatred and fear for her children. And a fearful king is a cruel king. Uranus was about to make a decision born from this fear, a decision that would betray his own family and set in motion the very rebellion he was so desperate to prevent. So, Uranus the sky finds himself in a deeply troubling situation. He is the first king, the ruler of a brand new cosmos, and he's a father. He has sired a generation of glorious, powerful titans who reflect his own majesty. But he has also fathered these others, the three Cyclopes, with their single, staring eyes and their mastery of the chaotic storm, and the three Hecatonchires, the 100-handed ones, walking embodiments of overwhelming, monstrous force. Uranus looks at these 6 children, and what he feels is not paternal pride. It is pure, unadulterated revulsion and terror. Hesiod tells us that Uranus hated them from the very first. He saw them as abominations, as grotesque insults to the perfection and order he represented. They were too powerful, too ugly, too much like the raw, untamed earth from which they sprang. They were a challenge to his authority just by existing. Their immense strength was a constant, silent threat. He was the king, and kings, especially insecure ones, do not tolerate potential rivals. So, he did something truly monstrous. As each of these 6 children was born, the Cyclopes, and then the Hecatonchires, Uranus refused to let them see the light of day. He took them and, using his immense power as the sky, he forced them back into the body of their mother. Gaia he pushed them deep down into a hidden cavity of the earth, a place called Tartarus, but not quite the separate primordial pit, more like the deepest, darkest dungeon within Gaia herself. He imprisoned his own children inside their mother's womb. I want you to really process the horror of that act. It is a profound violation on every level. For the children, it was a sentence of eternal darkness and confinement, smothered before they could even take their first breath of ether, the upper air. For Gaia, it was an act of unimaginable cruelty and physical agony. She was forced to carry her own monstrous, powerful children as a perpetual, painful burden within her own body. They were not dead. They were alive, trapped, and undoubtedly angry, constantly straining and struggling within her depths. She was their mother, and now, against her will, she was also their prison. The weight of them, both physical and emotional, was a constant source of torment. This is the first great act of tyranny in the cosmos. Uranus, the beautiful starry sky, reveals his true nature. He is not a benevolent ruler. He is a despot, motivated by fear and vanity. He is so terrified of being overthrown, so disgusted by anything he perceives as imperfect, that he would rather inflict eternal suffering on his own family than risk a challenge to his power. He took pleasure in this evil deed, Hesiod says. He saw it as securing his reign forever. He had his 12 perfect titans roaming the world, and the 6 mistakes were locked away where they could never threaten him. He thought he had solved the problem, but he had made a catastrophic miscalculation. He had forgotten about the bond between a mother and her children. While he may have hated the Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires, Gaia loved them. They were her offspring, born of her substance, and his cruel act had turned her from a loving partner into a suffering, vengeful victim. The very foundation of the world, the earth itself, was now groaning in pain, her vast body strained to the breaking point by the rebellious energy of her imprisoned sons. Every rumble deep within the earth, every tremor and quake was a sign of Gaia's suffering and the prisoner's rage. The harmony between earth and sky was shattered. The loving embrace of Uranus was now a suffocating weight of tyranny. Gaia's love for her husband curdled into a deep, burning hatred. She could no longer bear the agony, and she could no longer stand by while her children were tormented. Uranus, in his arrogance, believed he had removed the threat. In reality, he had created a far greater one. He had turned the earth itself against him. He had filled his own home with pain and resentment. A quiet seething rage was building in the heart of the world, and Gaia, the long-suffering mother, began to think. She began to plot. Her goal was no longer just to free her monstrous children, but to get revenge, to bring down the tyrant who ruled from above. She just needed a weapon, and she needed an accomplice. And she would find both among her other children, the ones Uranus had spared. The 12 Titans. The king's paranoia was about to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The first war for cosmic supremacy was brewing, not on a battlefield, but in the pained and plotting heart of the earth, Mother. The situation in the cosmos had become unbearable. The universe, which began with such potential, was now locked in a state of silent, agonizing tension. Above, Uranus ruled as a serene and beautiful tyrant, his starry dome, a facade of peace hiding a cruel heart. Below, Gaia, the earth, was in constant torment, her body a prison for her 6 most powerful children. The Cyclopes and the Hecatonchires raged in the darkness, their immense strength straining against their bonds, causing the very foundations of the world to groan and tremble. This was not a sustainable state of affairs. Something had to give, and the one who decided to act was Gaia, the Earth Mother, who had endured this torment for ages, finally reached her breaking point. The pain was too great, the injustice too profound. Her love for Uranus had been utterly destroyed, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had to be stopped, he had to be punished. The tyranny of the sky had to end. So, from deep within her own substance, from the core of her being, she created a new element. It wasn't a living creature this time. It was a tool. She produced a vein of grey flint, or adamant, a mythical metal that was diamond-hard and utterly unbreakable. This was the strongest substance in the universe. Then, using her innate knowledge of creation, she fashioned this metal into a weapon. It was a massive, terrifying sickle, or a harper kind of curved sword with a jagged sword. Its blade shimmered with a cold, grey light. It was a tool made for one purpose: reaping, not for harvesting grain, but for harvesting a king. With the weapon forged, Gaia needed a warrior to wield it. She couldn't act directly against Uranus herself. He was her equal, and their eternal embrace was the very structure of the world. She needed an insider, an agent of her vengeance. So, she gathered her other children, the 12 Titans, the ones who were allowed to roam free. Imagine the scene. The Earth Mother, her voice heavy with pain and rage, speaking to her magnificent children. She laid out the whole sordid story. She told them of the shameful, wicked deeds of their father. She spoke of their imprisoned brothers, the Cyclopes, and the 100-handed ones, suffering in the dark. She described her own unending agony, being forced to carry them within her. And then, she made her appeal. "My children," she said, her voice echoing through the hills and valleys, "you have a reckless, criminal father. If you will obey me, we will punish the evil outrage of your father, for he was the first to devise shameful acts." She held up the great, jagged sickle of adamant, its sharp edge gleaming. It was a test, a call to rebellion. Who among her glorious children had the courage to take up this weapon and rise against their own father, the king of the universe? But the Titans were terrified. Silence fell upon them. This was unthinkable, to attack their own father, the all-powerful Uranus, who covered the entire world. Fear seized them. They looked at each other, none of them willing to speak. They were gods of immense power, but the idea of patricide, of overthrowing the very order they were born into, was a line they were not prepared to cross. All of them, that is, except one. The youngest of the Titans, Cronus, finally broke the silence. He was known as a schemer of crooked counsel, the most ambitious and daring of the brothers. He felt no love for his monstrous father, who, Hesiod says, hated his Titan children too. Cronus saw his mother's plea not just as a call for justice, but as an opportunity, a path to power. He stepped forward and addressed his mother. "Gaia, mother," he said, his voice ringing with a confidence the others lacked. "I will undertake this deed. I feel no awe for our infamous father, for he was the first to devise shameful acts." Gaia was overjoyed. Her heart swelled with pride and relief. She had found her champion. She had her weapon, and she had her warrior. The plot was now in motion. She gave the great flint sickle to her son, Cronus, and then she explained the plan. It was a simple but brutal strategy, an ambush born of intimate knowledge. She told Cronus where to hide. She laid out the trap. Uranus, in his arrogance, suspected nothing. Every night as Nyx drew her dark veil across the world, Uranus would descend. Drawn by the force of Eros, his desire for Gaia, he would come to lie upon the earth, to cover her completely. This moment of intimacy, this act of creation, was about to be turned into a moment of horrific violence. Gaia would use her own body as the bait. Cronus, armed with the unbreakable sickle, would lie in wait. The son was about to attack the father at his most vulnerable. The stage was set for an act of betrayal that would change the cosmos forever. The plan was set. The trap was laid. As evening fell, the primordial goddess of night, Nyx, began to draw her dark, starry cloak across the world. Deep within a hidden place, An ambush was waiting. Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of the Titans, clutched the massive, jagged sickle of grey adamant. His heart was likely a storm of fear, anticipation, and ruthless ambition. He was about to commit the ultimate act of rebellion, a direct assault on his father, the king of the universe. He was crouched in a place of Gaia's choosing, ready to spring the trap. As he did every night, Uranus descended from the heavens. He was bringing the night, full of desire, drawn by the irresistible, primordial force of Eros, to unite with his partner. Gaia, he suspected nothing. His arrogance was his blindfold. He saw his reign as eternal, his power absolute. The idea that one of his children would dare to challenge him was unthinkable. He moved to embrace the earth, to cover her from horizon to horizon, stretching himself out over her vast form. This was the moment of cosmic union, the act that had created the Titans themselves. But tonight, it would be an act of utter devastation. Just as Uranus settled upon Gaia, Cronus sprang from his hiding place. From his left hand, a detail that made the left hand a symbol of ill omen for centuries to come, he swung the terrible, long, jagged sickle. He reached out, grabbed his father's genitals, and with one swift, brutal motion, he sliced them off. The act was shocking in its violence and its symbolism. It wasn't a battle of thrown mountains or clashing gods. It was a targeted, personal, and deeply humiliating assault. Cronus didn't just defeat his father. He castrated him. He didn't just usurp his throne. He ended his ability to procreate, to create any more monstrous children, or any more rivals. It was an act that forever severed the creative union of earth and sky. Never again would Uranus come to lie with Gaia in the same way. The sky was, in a sense, pushed away from the earth permanently, creating the space for the world as we know it to exist. The immediate aftermath was cataclysmic. Uranus roared in agony and fury, his divine blood, or ichor, spattering everywhere. He recoiled from the earth, pulling away in pain, and a chasm was opened between them forever. But the blood that fell from the wound was not inert. It was the lifeblood of a primordial god, and wherever it landed, new life sprang forth. The drops that fell upon the sea began to foam and churn. From this sea foam, a new goddess was born, rising from the waves on a scallop shell. She was breathtakingly beautiful, the embodiment of love, beauty, and desire. This was Aphrodite, the goddess of love, born from the violent castration of the sky god. It's a stunningly strange origin story. The goddess of love and beauty is a product of the most brutal act of patricidal violence imaginable. She is the beautiful consequence of a horrible crime, but the blood that fell upon Mother Earth, upon Gaia, gave birth to a far different and more terrifying brood. From these drops of divine blood sprang the Erinyes. These were three terrifying goddesses of vengeance, with snakes for hair and blood dripping from their eyes. Their entire existence was dedicated to pursuing and punishing those who committed the most heinous crimes, especially crimes against family, patricide, matricide, and breaking a sacred oath. It is a profound irony. The very act of violence that created them. Cronus' attack on his father was the exact kind of crime they were born to avenge. They were a living, breathing curse, born from the crime itself. Also from the blood on the earth came the gigantes, the giants. These were not the Hecate. This was a new race of massive, warlike beings, clad in armor, and brandishing spears, born with the express purpose of one day waging war against the gods of the sky. They were a ticking time bomb of vengeance, planted in the earth by Uranus's own blood. And finally, the Malaya, the nymphs of the ash trees, were born. Ash trees were significant because their wood was used to make spears, so even these seemingly gentle nymphs were tied to the concept of warfare and violence. After the horrific deed was done, Cronus, with contempt, took the severed members of his father and hurled them into the sea. His objective was complete. Uranus, the sky, was defeated, mutilated, and stripped of his power. His reign was over. As he retreated into the heavens, a wounded and diminished figure, he hurled one last curse at his treacherous children. He cursed them with their own name, calling them Titans the Strainers, because they had strained their power to do this terrible thing, and he prophesied that one day, they too would be punished for their crime. Vengeance would come for them, just as it had come for him. But for now, Cronus was victorious. He stood, holding the bloody sickle, as the undisputed new master of the universe. The age of Uranus was over. The age of the Titans had begun. With Uranus defeated and banished to the cosmic periphery, a power vacuum existed at the center of the universe. It was Cronus, the bold and brutal son, who stepped into that void. He was the one who had dared to wield the sickle, the one who had ended the tyranny of the sky by right of conquest. And with the initial blessing of his mother Gaia, he became the new king of the cosmos. The age of Titans had dawned. His first act as king was to consolidate his power. He freed his siblings, the 12 Titans, who had stood by in fear. Now, with Uranus gone, they became his royal court, the new ruling dynasty. He took his sister, the gentle Titaness Rhea, as his queen. The other Titans paired off as well, Oceanus with Tethys, Hyperion with Theia with Phoebe, and, for a time, it seemed like the prophecy of a golden age might finally come true. The world was ruled by a powerful family, and order was established, but Cronus had a problem. He had made a promise. A key part of his mother Gaia's plot was the liberation of her other children, the ones who had suffered the most. They were the original motivation for the rebellion. But Cronus looked at these monstrous, powerful siblings, and he felt the same fear and paranoia that had consumed his father. He saw their immense strength, not as an asset, but as a threat. They were too strong, too unpredictable. They could, he reasoned, one day do to him what he had done to Uranus. And so, in an act of staggering betrayal, Cronus broke his promise to his mother. He refused to release his monstrous brothers. He went even further, reinforcing their prison, making sure they were locked away even more securely in the dark pit of Tartarus. This was his first great mistake. He had betrayed the very person who had put him on the throne. Gaia, who had plotted to free her children, now saw one tyrant replaced by another. Her son was proving to be just as cruel and paranoid as his father. The seeds of another rebellion were sown, this time in the heart of a twice-betrayed mother. Cronus's reign, therefore, was built on a foundation of paranoia, and this fear was cemented by the dying curse of his father, Uranus, and a prophecy from his own parents, Gaia and Uranus. They told him that he was fated to be overthrown by one of his own children, just as he had overthrown his father. This prophecy would define his entire reign. It consumed him. Every decision he made was colored by this terror of being replaced. He and his wife, Rhea, began to have children. These were not Titans. They were a new, powerful generation of gods who would one day be known as the Olympians. The first to be born was a daughter, but as Cronus looked at his own child, he didn't see a daughter to be loved. He saw the first potential threat, the first agent of his prophesied doom. So, driven by his all-consuming fear, he did something even more horrific than his father. Uranus had merely imprisoned his children. Cronus took his newborn daughter Hestia, and he swallowed her whole. He entombed her not in the earth, but in his own stomach. When his next child, Demeter, was born, he did the same. Then Hera, then Hades, then Poseidon. One by one, as soon as they were born, Rhea would present the beautiful, divine infant to her husband, and he would seize the child and swallow it. Imagine the horror and grief of Rhea. She was the titaness of motherhood, and she was forced to watch her husband devour every single one of their children. Her palace, which should have been filled with the joy of new life, was a place of silent, repeating tragedy. She was trapped in a cycle of birth and monstrous consumption, her heart breaking over and over again. She was living a nightmare, married to a king so terrified of the future that he was eating his own legacy. But like her mother Gaia before her, Rhea's grief eventually hardened into a desperate resolve. As she became pregnant with her 6th child, she knew she could not let this one suffer the same fate. She went to her parents, Gaia and Uranus, and begged them for help. She pleaded with them to help her devise a plan to save her unborn child, and to finally bring vengeance upon Cronus for his crimes against his father and his own children. Gaia, still bitter from Cronus's own betrayal, was more than willing to help. They concocted a plan. They told Rhea to go to the island of Crete, to a remote cave on Mount Dicte, to give birth in secret. The age of the Titans, which had begun with a son betraying his father, was about to end with a wife betraying her husband, or to save her child. The cycle of patricide was poised to repeat, and the child who would set it all in motion, the one who would finally fulfill the prophecy, was about to be born. His name would be Zeus. And so, the stage is set for the final, epic confrontation. The Titan King, Cronus, sits on his throne, ruling over a golden age that is a lie, a thin veneer of order covering a core of pure paranoia and monstrous cruelty. He believes he is safe, having swallowed his children and his fears along with them. But in a secret cave, far from his watchful eyes, A son is growing up, a son fueled by the righteous anger of his mother and grandmother. The child, Zeus, is being raised in secret, nurtured for a single purpose: to return and challenge the Cannibal king for control of the cosmos. The great war between the Titans and the Olympians is inevitable, and it will be a conflict that will shake foundations of the universe and decide the fate of heaven and earth for all time to come.